Okay, he's right. She sounds like a really interesting speaker. She sounds a bit scary to me, actually, that woman. Please laugh. I need you to laugh at that. Okay, can you hear me at the moment? And if I come over here, you can still hear me, can't you? Yay, because when I stand here, it's a bit like being in prison for me. Lovely. Okay, and you have a fantastic tech team who has already put my slides up. It's wonderful to be with you today because when we can think about what children in a place need, that was a fantastic way to kick us off. Are we getting it right in a place? Are we getting it right in a community instead of in a service? It helps us to start to think about the whole of a child's experience or the whole of a family's experience. And once we get our heads around that, we can sometimes understand why a parent is reluctant to engage with our service. And the answer is because they didn't have a very good experience of another service, despite all those people's attempts to do their very best. And sometimes that happens because the regulations don't let people in that service deliver what they would like to. Or when you come to the end of the service, they have to say goodbye, perhaps without even any transition to the next person who's going to help. When we can start to think about those things, we realize that all of our services are not actually attachment-led, attachment-based, even when people are trying to do their best. So, when I was thinking about what words I might put together today to help us think about that, I started with the title of the conference, Building Resilient Communities. But any of you who have heard me speak before know that I can't just stick with one title because I get really intrigued by what words do. So what if we changed those words? What if we had called it Building Communities of Inclusion? Professionals like that term. They like inclusion. It sounds very formal and official, except a whole lot of people don't exactly know exactly what it means because it sounds formal. So what if we had called it Building Communities of Welcome? If I had had the pack before I got here, I might have called it Building Communities where Babies Are Claimed. It's a wonderful word in the pack, where babies are claimed, where babies are welcomed, where families are welcomed and claimed. That's a community that is attachment-led. And of course, once upon a time, all our communities would have been that way because we lived in tribes. And you were born into your community, and you stayed in your community. And now we live in cities and places where we may not know anyone. How do we create a community that claims new people? Those questions become very, very important in a world in which we are now arguing about where we're going to send the refugees. How do we create communities of welcome for people who don't have a community anywhere anymore because theirs has been destroyed, especially if they have heard in the news that they weren't really wanted? You've all gone very quiet. Can you feel that quiet where you can almost like touch it? Good, I like those. It means that already you are thinking deeply. And I haven't even finished the title slide yet. So what else if we had called it? What if we had called it Building Communities of Belonging? They're just different words for the same idea, but somehow having different words often really helps us to think in new ways. Because if we can go from inclusion and belonging and claiming and welcome, what if we called it this? Building communities that banish saber-toothed tigers. That does not sound very professional. And yet, that is the language that I'm now using to talk about attachment, to help us think about it in new ways. And if we had called today this, then here's what I really would have called it. Why children need you to understand the danger of saber-toothed tigers. Because all of you may understand that saber-toothed tigers have died out. They are extinct. In fact, they never lived in Britain at all. But our babies don't know that. Our babies are born with brains that think they are still alive, and they're scared. And they need you, they need us, to help them to understand that we will protect them until they learn how to cope with their fear of saber-toothed tigers, which another word for which is anxiety. So if I had called today anything, that's what I would have called it. If you could leave here at the end of today understanding that all those words mean attachment, and that part of that is that babies are born afraid that they're going to be eaten up by a predator, then it helps you to think about what services do we need, what kind of community do we need, and what do we need to tell other people to help them to really understand what attachment is. Does that sound like a kind of interesting thing to talk about for the whole day? Okay then, right. You have already heard quite a bit about me, except with this lovely, scary introduction, except you didn't hear the crazy part, okay? I did all that stuff, and as an academic, I got increasingly frustrated because I knew that I had access to all this fabulous new science, cutting-edge discoveries that would be of interest to parents and to people who work with children and families. And I knew they often didn't have access to it because the journal articles are full of scary big words that often confuse people, or they don't have even access to the journal. So if you found a lovely new paper that you wanted to download that was the latest discoveries about attachment, it would cost you about 30 pounds. And most people don't have that in their budget these days. And even if you had all of those, most people don't have time to read them. Most people do not have the Journal of Reproductive and Infant Psychology on their bedside stand. So the place that most people get their science and their new discoveries is from the press. And can I tell you that the press don't always get it right? So I got increasingly frustrated about how could I help people to have access to the things that I was so enthusiastic about. And so in 2011, which is 6 years ago now, 5.5 years ago, I took that whole history that you heard about and did a crazy thing. I took that well-paid, well-pensioned academic job, and in the middle of what turned out to be the worst recession in post-war Britain, I resigned. Yeah, can you please do that one more time? I need you to laugh because it's crazy. I resigned from a well-paid job in order to get people interested in science. That is nuts. Except it turns out that if you can make it accessible and people stop being scared of it, they do want to know. Because this is a slide that gives you a sense of the kind of people that want to know about the same basic kinds of things that we're talking about today. And it lets you put whatever your role is into this bigger picture. So can I just check, do we have social workers here today? Put up your hands. Have a quick look around the room. Okay, we've got quite a few of those. Do we have early years staff? Put up your hands. Have a look around the room. Do we have family support staff? Lovely. Do we have police? Yay. Do we have any manufacturers of baby buggies? Okay, you know who to get in for the next year's conference, okay? That's a flavor of people who are wanting to talk about this. And when you have police interested in the same thing as manufacturers of baby buggies, the world's a changing place. Because manufacturers of baby buggies, for the most part, still know nothing about attachment. They don't know that the fact that most of their buggies face outwards is breaking connection and that matters. So where's our lovely principal psychologist? Which direction does the buggy face for the sun in New Zealand? Oh, no. Okay, see? We're sending him information about buggies as well. Police didn't used to know that early years mattered so much for the ability to manage your behavior and therefore has an influence on violence. If we can bring those two communities together as well as all of these, we are really starting to spread what I call the science of connection. So when I talk about that, I forever come back to 3 themes. 1, babies arrive already connected. 2, brains are shaped by connection. And 3, that babies suffer if they don't feel connected. And indeed, grown-ups suffer if they don't feel connected. And communities suffer if they don't feel connected to each other. And it turns out that I can talk about this for days and days and days. And I said to Cheryl, it's fantastic. We're getting together more than 200 people. Can we have a residential? But she said there wasn't room to store all the sleeping bags. So if we only have one day, and I'm just a part of that day, what might I talk about? This is what I thought I would do. I thought I would talk about 3 themes. One, are we getting it? Secondly, okay, what does connection mean? Because it is because babies arrive in the world already connected. We are innately connected to other people as human beings. That lies at the heart of attachment. So I thought that I would touch on those 3 themes, and we will stop and have a break in between the second and the third, because by that point your heads will hurt and you will need a break. Does that sound good to you? Yes? Okay then. All right, let's start here. I want to start by posing a question. Are we getting it? I have indeed. It's nearly 40,000 people who have been to events where I've been asked to speak. And that means I have been invited by a lot of different organizations to speak to these themes. And I have a sense of what's happening in a lot of local authorities and a lot of organizations across, especially across Scotland, but across the UK and beyond. Can I tell you, I have never been to a local authority where they have been struggling to come up with a new operational definition of attachment. Only you do I know, as a large organization, and of course organizations coming together, who has attempted to do that. Isn't that interesting? What has happened in North Lanarkshire for you to get how important attachment is and to try to embed that thinking at the center of everything you do in this place? And the reason I'm stressing that is you might take that for granted. Often we don't know what's happening elsewhere, we only know what's happening with us, and so we kind of think that's normal. It is not normal for local authorities to struggle with their definition of attachment. So you are doing something unusual and special. How could we get more areas and more organizations to do that? And the reason I ask that is that there are a lot of people worried about the consequences of not doing that. Here's one of them. This is Gabor Mate. He wrote a book in 2010 called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, which I really like because it's kind of poetic. You think, what is that book about? In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. It's about parapsychology and hauntings, except it's not. It's about drugs. And he says in this book that, in fact, not just his whole message is that if we're going to treat drugs, drugs is not the problem. What the problem is lack of connection. And that drugs are a stand-in if you don't have enough of a sense of connection to the other people around you. And here's one little excerpt from this fabulous, thick book. He says, the 3 environmental conditions absolutely necessary to optimal human development are 1, nutrition, 2, physical security, and 3, consistent emotional nurturing. And then he goes on to say something very starkly and scarily, I think. The third one, emotional nurturance, is the one most likely to be disrupted in Western society. He thinks that Western modern society doesn't provide enough emotional nurturing to our babies, and that there are terrible consequences that flow from that, such as the drug epidemic that we're all coping with. Now, here's what you need to do, please, as we go through my talk. You need to decide what you think, okay? You might think that's an overstatement. You might think that he's just worded that too strongly and he should use softer words. You might think this is so overstated that he should not be allowed to say that and he should get his book off the shelves. You might think it's an unfortunate turn of phrase, but okay, he's got right to his opinion. Or you might think he's right. And you might be excited he said it. Or you might be scared he said it. Because could that be your family? Could that be your service that's adding to that? Or could it be everybody else's, but here in North Lanarkshire, we provide plenty of emotional nurturance, and we need to get him to come and visit us. Because then in his next book, he'll talk about how North Lanarkshire is standing out from what he sees happening in a lot of the rest of Western society. You need to know what you think. It doesn't actually matter what I think. It matters what you think. Because you are the ones trying to make North Lanarkshire a place that really gets attachment. But it becomes interesting in your thinking to know that you can press up against what Gabor Mate thinks. Because here's another scary thing. He's not the only one who's worried. This is Erica Christakis' book, published in 2016, has a great title, The Importance of Being Little, What Preschoolers Really Need from Grown-Ups. And here's a review of her book. Christakis argues that most of today's youngest children are spending their critical early learning years in environments that ignore or misunderstand their needs. The kind of respectful observation that children need of what they can and cannot do is rare in early childhood settings. If you work in an early childhood setting, you might be feeling a bit sore right now. Is that us? Not mine. Mine is terrific. Erica Christakis, come and see my setting. Because we do have respectful observation. Good. We need to tell the world about your setting. Because Erica Christakis thinks that most of today's youngest children are spending time in environments that don't meet their needs. Is she right? Or is she overstated? Should she not be allowed to say that? Because if she's right, we're wasting a whole lot of money from our government and from local authority funds. Why are we doing that? Is it because we don't know? Okay, get me to come and talk to who doesn't know. Get her to come and talk. Get somebody from North Lanarkshire who gets it to go and talk. We would be wasting money and we would be impairing lives. Of course, we might be doing that without knowing it or ever meaning to. But if we can't hear her, if we can't consider what she is saying, then we can't be curious about it. We can't step into something that feels a bit sore. Because I'll be really happy if she's wrong. But my question is, what if she's right? Here's somebody else who's worried. This is Darcia Narvaez, and she has a book called The Neurobiology and the Development of Human Morality, Evolution, Culture, and Wisdom. You are going to rush out and buy this book on your bedside stand, right? No one is going to read this book. It's a fabulous book, but it's mostly academics that are going to read this book because the title is scary. But she's saying the same thing. She says we are at a turning point yearning for change to an empathic, cooperative world. That's what you're making with Lanarkshire, empathic and cooperative. But she says we've missed the information that's needed to help us achieve this because we use too limited a range of models of what development looks like, and our thinking is impaired. So instead, most people follow Darcia Narvaez's ideas in her blogs. So this is one from January. It says, be worried about boys, especially baby boys. And she says this in it. Boys are more vulnerable to neuropsychiatric disorders that appear in the early years. Those are disorders like autism, ADHD, and schizophrenia, and that they have been increasing in recent years. And then she too says, notably more babies have also been put into daycare settings in recent years, nearly all of which provide inadequate care for babies. Now, several of you who have just looked over at the person sitting next to you and leaned in for support. This is hard to hear. We are being very brave. You had no idea that you signed up for a bravery conference, did you? We are being really brave to think about this, because what if it's true? What if it's true that our daycare settings provide inadequate care for babies? Nobody wants to do that. What do we need to do to change it? Who's it true for and who's it not true for? And are we brave enough to even consider that? Because she thinks that our boys are especially struggling. Now, I think she got some flack for that blog because her next one picked up on the theme. Here's her next one. Why worry about under-cared for males? Because it produces messed up morals, she says. She goes on to say males are more susceptible to early stress, which is an earlier point, resulting in higher levels of developmental disorders. She means ADHD, autism, schizophrenia. These are signals of early development gone awry, but they are also often social disorders that end up harming everyone else. Do you know, I read a blog recently by this woman named Suzanne Zeedyk. She seemed to be picking up on the same thing. And do you know the picture that it was the top of her blog? Suzanne Zeedyk's latest blog is entitled, Can Attachment Needs Help Explain Donald Trump's Narcissism? And you know, she told me that she wrote the blog and then you load it all up to the computer and then you press this button on a blog that says publish. And she told me that as she pressed that button, she felt distinctly nauseous. Because she thought, oh my God, maybe she's gone really too far this time? Except what if it's true? Is it fair to say that Donald Trump is narcissistic? Some people have said that Donald Trump has narcissistic personality disorder, that he has a mental illness, that he is mentally deranged. Dr. Zeedyk, those are strong words. What if it's true? What if it's true that someone with a neuropsychiatric disorder or personality disorder, what shall we call it, has been elected to be the President of the United States and will have a tremendous impact on everyone else? Darcia Narvaez thinks that's important for us to think about. What if Donald Trump's narcissism, if we want to call it that, personality disorder, if we want to call it that, is due to unmet needs as a child? What if one of the messages that we can take from Donald Trump's presidency of the United States is how important the early years are? But you only take that message if you put those two parts of the argument together. If you just think he's a bit of a bully, and you haven't thought about where does bullying come from, you don't know to put those two things together. Well, I was at Pullman Prison a couple of weeks ago. Do you know that at Pullman Prison, 80% of the young men there were in care? 80% were in care, experienced disconnection from their community and their families, from a sense of being claimed and belonging. So here's a question on that perspective. Was the damage done in early years, and social work and now prisons are coping with it? Or was there damage done in early years and it was made worse by the system? Because that's a very high proportion of young men who have suffered loss and disconnection. In fact, there was a survey done in 2015 by Action for Children which looked at that. And what they did was write to all local authorities and ask the number of placements that children in care in their local authority had experienced over the last year. And what they found was that 1 in 4 foster children had moved at least once. And some had moved 7 times in 1 year. I like it. Several of you, your faces have just gone, good. That means you are willing to feel this. What's it like to be moved to 7 different places, knowing that the last people didn't like you, couldn't cope with you, didn't want you? Here's the actual figures, if you can see them. Here's the figures for Scotland. So in 2015, in Scotland, there were 6,415 children in care. 753 of them had 2 places. 8 of them had 6 placements. Okay, 8 isn't very many. But I'll bet that those are the boys who are very likely to end up in Pullman Prison. Look, Here are 149 children who had 3 placements. Placement sounds like the placement on a supermarket shelf. Why do we call them placements? We don't call them homes. We don't call them attachment settings. Our language calls them placements. You are very brave to think about this because we are contemplating heartbreak. See all of these numbers? These are all heartbreak. Our children are suffering because they have heartbreak. It's another way, it's another piece of language that we could use to talk about attachment. Heartbreaks. Does the heartbreak occur before you come into care? So something happens that's dreadful enough that the system decides we need to take you away from the family who have claimed you to whatever extent they were able to do that. Is the system coping with early heartbreak and helping those children to heal? Or is the system doing its very best, causing more heartbreak? Because if the system is causing more heartbreak, we better fix it, because we are making it worse. We don't have to mean to do that to inflict damage and pain. But we have to be brave enough to really think about what this means in order to think about what are the solutions. And we can get really excited that there are solutions if we are brave enough to really get the problem in the first place, which is why I have tipped you. Oh, I've scared even myself. Messed up my moment. I have tipped you over into deep thinking, and it's not even 10:30 yet. Okay? I am trying to get us to really feel this. Rather than think it in his head, I'm trying to get us to feel what it's like to really move us. Okay. So if those are dark places, how do we help people to understand? How do we help them to get it? Well, here's one way. So this is Who Cares Scotland. That's the organization that tries to meet the needs of adults who were children in care. Well, they took part in a documentary last year with STV News in which they used the word love. That's how radical they are. They said that what the system needs is love. And these are 4 of the young people who feature in that documentary. And the lovely story is that this young woman now has her own little girl. The point of that is, why can we not use the word love in care? That's their point. Even the word is not used. So part of the way they're trying to get people to understand is they spent an hour on television talking about why we need the word love in the care system. The trouble is, it doesn't sound very professional and people get nervous about that word. So they are really being bolshy and they are arguing for the word love. Who Cares Scotland has helped to drive the care review that Nicola Sturgeon and the Scottish Government now wants to undertake. How about this? This is the Children's Parliament. They had an announcement only yesterday. Do you know what this is? This is an unfeirty. This is the king of the unfeirties. Children's Parliament yesterday announced they set forth on Scotland a whole band of unfeirties. And they're hoping that many more people will want to sign up to become unfeirties. I am very proud to be one of the first 21 unfeirties to celebrate their 21st birthday. Where does it come from? Well, this is Edwin Morgan's poem, which he wrote for the opening of the Scottish Parliament in 2004. And part of that poem says this. It begins, "Open the doors, light of the day shine in, light of the mind shine out. What do the people want of the place?" And by that he means the Scottish Parliament, the Scottish Parliament building, Scotland itself. But when we heard the word place used, my heart did a little teeny pitter-patter because I went, ooh, that's in his poem. What do the people want of the place? They want it to be filled with thinking persons, as open and adventurous as its architecture, which you may remember was hotly debated at the time. A nest of fearties is what they do not want. So Children's Parliament has created the unfearties, people who are willing to be radical and brave and adventurous in thinking about what children need and how to support their voices. And in order to do that, they've ended up with this lovely, silly drawing with a crown on. Could it really be true that we are that scared? Could it really be true that we are so scared we can't use the word love in our care system? That we are so scared that many other local authorities haven't actually got to grips with what the word attachment means. Okay, I'm suggesting it's fear that often keeps us from doing that. It might be other things. You might say it's not fear, it's lack of knowledge, or it's lack of time, or it's too many tick box pieces of paper. Okay, let's reduce the tick box pieces of paper. Do I hear a yay? Sorry. Let's start using the word love. What is the problem that keeps us from thinking about this? Scottish Parliament thinks maybe it's fear, so they have created unfearties. You need to know what you think keeps us from thinking about this, because what I'm talking about does not sound like rocket science, does it? Once I say it, does it sound kind of obvious? Then what has kept us from thinking about it? Because now I'm really going to push it. As I come to the end of this first section about are we getting it? We have a Scottish Attainment Challenge, which is welcome and celebratory. And in fact, there was a big announcement yesterday that there was a new tranche of money released for the Attainment Challenge. And when we think of the Attainment Challenge, we often think of arguments about testing. We often think about the outcomes for numeracy and literacy. Well, there are other people using different language like attachment. So here's a piece from TES from last year. And TES is a very well-respected educational discussion piece. Says why attachment theory should inform schools' behavior strategies. This piece thinks that every single school in the country needs to know about attachment, that's primary and secondary, and that their behavior strategies need to be informed by attachment so that they understand what is causing behavior that schools often perceive as challenging behavior. In fact, here's a piece that says trauma-sensitive schools are better schools. And we're going to hear about trauma later today. So this piece is arguing, in a sense, that all schools, if you want to be a really good school, you need to be trauma sensitive. That's the language they are using. Well, Dr. Zeedyk would say this: if our attainment strategy is not attachment-led and trauma-informed, it will not succeed. Dr. Zeedyk, you are not allowed to say that. Dr. Zeedyk, that is negative thinking. Dr. Zeedyk, we want positive thinking here. Okay, let me turn it around. If our attainment strategy is attachment-led and trauma-informed, then it can succeed. For all our children who have had much fear and heartbreak, many of them, to deal with, that's how to make it successful. But I have purposely worded it in a stronger way, and I'm very happy if people want to push back and say, that's not true. Because then it lets us ask, is it true? Is it true that if our attainment strategy is not attachment-led and trauma-informed, it cannot succeed? Because if I am right, all that money that just got launched yesterday will be wasted. I don't think that the government officials who launched it intended to be wasted. I don't think whatever proportion of it North Lanarkshire has received, you want it to be wasted. Am I right, or have I overstated? Am I allowed to say that, or is it just my opinion? Or is it possible I'm right? Because if it's possible I'm right, we need to think more about how to make our attainment strategy link to exactly the things that we are talking about here. That is how those worldwide themes that I've tried to point to matter here in Scotland today, because new money was announced yesterday. Does that make sense to you? Does that make you feel slightly worried in your tummy? Because I want it to. Does that mean John Swinney is going to receive a whole raft of tweets at the end of the day? He said, do you know what that woman zeedyk said now? If it means that, good. He's got a whole raft of people to help him read those tweets. Because if he isn't hearing that, we need to help him hear that. Because he doesn't want to get this wrong. Because we have staked part of Scotland's political future on the achievement of our education system. And this is how we will achieve that. So, can I ask you please now, me having dumped you into darkness, can you please reach into your packs and take out one of those pieces of paper that's in your pad? And get out a pen, because I'm going to get you to give me some written feedback, and I'm going to get you to do several questions across the course of my talking, because I want to know what you think about what I'm saying, but I also want you to know what you think about what I'm saying. So I'm pushing it. Can you please write down your answer to question number 1? Do you think that as a society, as a Scottish society, do you think that we're getting the message of relationships? Yes, substantially. Yes, somewhat. Or no, you think that by and large, we're not really getting the message of these things that I'm talking about. And secondly, why do you think that? So, do you think we're really getting it, we're getting it a bit, or we're not getting it? And then secondly, why do you think that? Because when you know what you think, it lets you have a better sense of what to say to your colleagues or to the woman standing at the bus stop next to you when you leave here today. What you're going to say to John Swinney in that tweet. What you're going to say to your local authority leaders who are here and who are thinking hard about attachment. It's they're all still here. Did you notice that? All the people who spoke are still here. Very often when I go to a conference, they come and welcome us, and then they have something else to do. They leave. Your leaders haven't. They're still here. They're thinking about this too. They're writing down answers to the same questions that you're writing down answers to. Okay, so if you know what you think, and if you know that, you're going to be able to help them think how we're going to do more of this. Let me come on to my second theme. And after this theme, we're going to stop and have that cup of tea because we've been traveling in dark places, okay? What I want to stress is how important really understanding this idea of innate connection is. Because it's our innate connectedness as human beings and as human babies that lies at the heart of the attachment system and at the heart of trauma, and why trauma, which we're going to hear about, why heartbreak is so traumatic for human beings. And that's because we come into the world already connected. Here's what that looks like. My question guiding all of this is still the same one. How do we help people to get this? Everything we are talking about today is captured in this image. This is a 3-month-old baby in the middle of rough and tumble play with her mom. And it's snapped by my team. So we have a photographer on my team who, part of his job is to take pictures of families and at nurseries to help people to get it. So we were invited into her home. She was in the middle of just doing what she normally did, and this is just a snapped moment. But look at it. This is a 3-month-old baby. 3-month-old babies are just getting to the point where they can hold up their own heads, but they're still having to work at it. But this baby is working really hard to hold her head up. She's got strength in her arms. She's holding herself up so she can keep her eyes on her mom. Can you see how bright her eyes are? Can you see how big her smile is? That's about connecting with her mom. This is her world. And her daddy, if daddy or mom's partner or granny, that's her world, the people who do this with her. What I especially, so this is connection. This captures everything we're talking about. Except that most people look at that and see a sweet picture. Ah, sweet. This is also a picture of trauma if you don't have enough of those moments. And what I really love about this picture is you can't see mom's face, can you? But intuitively you know what it looks like. Yes? Somehow you know that mom's face has a really big smile and eyes right back at her daughter. And if we can tell that from this photo, what happens if mom is not smiling? What happens if mom is depressed? 25% of mothers in our country experience some period of postnatal depression. So here's one thing that will be happening. I'm just trying to help us to understand the science. I haven't shown us a graph. I've shown us an image of connection. I've talked about some of the things that the data tell us about depression. And there will be women in this audience who struggled with postnatal depression. So if you are one of those women, thank you for being in this room with us. Because my just highlighting that helps us to think about it. Because the women in this room who have had postnatal depression now have slightly higher cortisol levels, very likely, than those of us who haven't struggled with postnatal depression. Because I just said something that is a little bit hard and scary for them. They're wondering if they had an impact on their baby's brains that they didn't mean to. In the same way as our earlier story, not helping the baby to crawl because you didn't know. When you hear this stuff later on, the first thing parents do is go to a place of guilt. So Dr. Zeedyk, it turns out, resigned to go about the country making parents feel guilty. Please laugh. Because I didn't do that. What I have discovered is that hearing this information takes real courage because it takes us to places that make us feel worried about whether we have done the job of parenting our children that we wanted to. So we have to find ways to hear what it says and support people in the middle of the anxiety that it may raise in them in order to really hear it. Because here's the thing, we know that rates of postnatal depression are varying degrees are roughly about 25%. But we don't have nearly enough services to support the mothers that we find who do have postnatal depression or other forms of mental and emotional distress after their baby comes. All of that, if you understand that, if we understand that, is captured in this picture. Well, I love talking about this because then it turns out that other people begin to get it. Because here's another picture of a baby, and in this case a grandmother, but it wasn't taken by my photographer. This was sent to me by somebody who came to a training. And she was so excited, she sent it the next day and she said, so this came in on Facebook. Suzanne, I just have to show you this picture. This is what you mean, isn't it? This is connection, this is connection. Lots of exclamation points, lots of capital letters in this very excited message. This was a picture taken in the labor suite with my mom. The baby's in her arms. We thought it was a sweet picture. We didn't realize it was connection until I went to your training. But this is what you mean, isn't it? Baby's looking at my mom. Here's a mother who understands something new about her baby because she went to a training seminar. And she's so excited she needs to share it. And she's right. Because look, here's this baby. This baby is minutes old in the arms of grandma. She could be looking at a lot of things in this new world, but where is she looking? She's looking at grandma. Her brain anticipates that grandma will be looking back at her. Her brain anticipates that this is a woman who is going to love me. Her brain anticipates that I will be included and welcomed in my grandmother's arms. And where's grandma looking? Grandma's looking at all of you. Grandma's showing off the baby. Of course she is. It's a new baby and we're very proud. It's very easy to have cameras now everywhere. Once upon a time, there would have been no camera in a labor delivery suite or a cave where a baby was being born. And so there would have been no cause to do this. This tiny moment is shaping that baby's brain. Now, before we decide, oh no, bad grandmas too. It's only a teeny moment. It's snapped. Babies have zillions of experiences that shape their brains. They don't need attention all the time. All parents can relax now. They do not need attention all the time. But here's what I love about this photograph. Brand new baby, brain expects connection, grandma's looking at you, and that baby can sustain that disconnection for at least the amount of time it takes to take a picture. That baby is still looking at grandma. That baby trusts grandma. That baby has faith that grandma will look back at her in a minute. I love that. And yet, if you know to look more closely, where is the baby's finger? The baby is self-soothing. The baby learned to do that in the womb, and the baby is using, minutes old, her fingers to help her be patient while grandma looks at you. This is a tiny moment of anxiety for this baby. There's a saber-toothed tiger at the edge of the labor suite. Because the baby is about to learn whether her grandmother really will look back. And how long will it take her? And that will be influencing her brain. And if her grandmother doesn't look back soon, and if her grandmother doesn't keep looking back, then what this wee one will start to learn is that grandmas don't pay attention to you. Now, they might survive that if mamas and daddies pay attention to you. But what happens if they don't pay attention to? You get my point, right? Dr. Zeedyk, you are awful. You go from this lovely, beautiful photograph to making us worry about all the babies in the world. Good. Because the question is, how do we help people to get innate connection? What do we need to do to help people to understand that babies come into the world with brains that are expecting connection, and that lies at the heart of everything that we are talking about in nurture? What do we need to tell them? Okay? We go from this to influencing the brain. It gets built into the neural pathways in the brain. Okay. Perhaps this is one way. How do we know babies come into the world connected? What evidence do we have of that? What have the scientists discovered? So here's a really quick set of examples. In the 1970s, we learned that newborns will imitate facial expressions. So this is Andy Meltzoff. He's a famous scientist. In the 1970s, they were just discovering this. It was a really controversial discovery at the time. And he's demonstrating that if you take babies 3 days old or less and you stick out your tongue at them, they will stick their tongue back out at you. If you do mouth openings, you could even add a vowel sound, ah. Brand new babies, if they're not struggling too much, if they haven't had too many drugs, if they're not in withdrawal from illegal drugs, so they don't all do it. There's a bit of differentiation, but by and large, most babies, if they're alert, imitate both facial expressions and sounds. Here's a baby imitating pursing. This is very hard to do. You can see it is so hard to do that this baby has gone cross-eyed with the effort. Babies think that's meaningful. Babies' brains are saying something like, oh, well, now here I am on this planet Earth. Oh, that must be how they say hello. They go like that. Okay, I'd better learn to go like that. That's how my tribe says hello, baby. Their brains think it's meaningful. It's not just mouth openings. This is a very bad picture because of the way of the technology of this experiment. They also do it with fingers. Okay, so this is another psychologist named Emma Nagy doing work I think this paper is 2014, so this is much more up to date. And she demonstrated that if you do this with a brand new baby, you extend your forefinger. So that's her forefinger right there. Babies will imitate you. And in fact, this particular baby got so into it that they put out both fingers. And she demonstrated that brand new babies will have conversations. So if you stick out your finger, they'll stick out theirs. They'll do turn taking. 36 hours old. And then if you go, oh, let's change the topic. Let's talk about this. Babies will do this. In fact, they'll do 3 topics. They'll even do this. Can you please do this with me? This is hard to do, isn't it? Some of you are finding it so hard you're looking at your hands to make sure you're checking. Brand new babies will endeavor to make the same gesture in time. Brand new babies are born conversational, connected, expecting exchanges. Here's another way that we know that. This happens to be a 3-month-old baby. This is a piece out in 2011 in a journal called Infant Behavior and Development, and they measured heart rate of both mother and baby, and that when a mother smiles at the baby, their heart rates align. So they have the same rhythmic beat of heartbeat. We are so connected, it's happening physiologically, not just in our behavior, but in our very biology. Here's another one. Let's move all the way down to the womb. This is the Cat in the Hat study, in which they got mothers to read Cat in the Hat to their babies every day for the last 6 months in the womb, last 6 weeks in the womb. And then they hooked the babies up when they got here to an electronic nipple, measured how fast the babies sucked while they played them recordings of their mother's voice reading Cat in the Hat, or their mother's voice reading Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And do you know, at 3 days old, babies could tell the difference between the story they had heard in the womb and the story they had never heard. Cat in the Hat versus Goldilocks and the Three Bears. They could also tell the difference between a recording of their mother reading Cat in the Hat and a stranger reading Cat in the Hat. And they could even tell the difference, and I think this is the most magical thing about this study, the babies could tell the difference when you just change the vowel sound. Cat in the Hat versus dog in the fog. 3-day-old babies can tell the difference in the vowel sounds that they heard while they were in the womb. I think this is astounding. Because it means that they hear the world as a piece of music. If you don't know that a story has a plot, what it sounds like is a piece of music. And in fact, they have done that. This is a piece published in the 1980s under the title Fetal Soap Addiction, in which they recorded which soap operas mothers listened to. And you might be familiar with the idea that soap operas come with a theme tune. So there'll be a particular theme tune for Coronation Street as opposed to EastEnders. And all of you who are watching soap operas have that tune running in your head now, yes? Babies tune in to the songs that they hear around them. So they come into the world already a Corey Street watcher, if you watch Corey Street. They respond to that song. So it really is a song. You know, these are studies about the songs the baby hears in the world, which is fantastic. If it's a sweet story about Cat in the Hat, or if it's soap operas that we enjoy. Of course, if you think about it, so the baby can hear it. Mom sits down, she's got a cup of tea, so she's got relaxation hormones flooding through her body. So we've got this biological association with that music going on in the baby's growing brain. Fantastic. Except if the voices that you hear around you are singing a song of terror. What if there's domestic violence going on in your household? What if there's lots of screaming and yelling? Domestic violence goes up during pregnancy. The baby hears those voices, whether they are singing lovely lullabies or whether they are shouting abuse. Can you feel what's happened with the silence again? It takes courage to think about the fact that there will be babies who are born already scared of the world because they know that it's a place where they can hear the angry tones in the voices. They're born already expecting the world to be scary. And if we then go on to understand how the experiences the child is going to have, say in a house where there continues to be violence, by the time they get to your nursery class or your schoolroom and they have a whole lot of fear, they know saber-toothed tigers hide at the door, it starts to explain why their behavior might be different, why their ability to self-regulate their fear and their feelings might be different, because they were scared before they were born. These are not new data. Look, this was published in 1988. This was published in 1986. The earlier ones with the faces were done in the 1970s. This is not new stuff. But somehow we haven't really linked what the science was discovering with practitioners and babies and families' real lived lives. I don't want to be here in another 10 years or 20 years where local authorities are still having lovely conferences where we're amazed by this. I want you to be bored. I want audiences to go, we know that. Babies arrive connected. Yeah. What have you got to tell us now? But right now, people still don't get this, how in tune babies are, that they arrive with a brain that anticipates responses. Other people are still saying it. Here's one more piece. This is Annie Murphy Paul's work. This is this fantastic book published in 2010, How the 9 Months Before Birth Shape the Rest of Our Lives. She's got a fantastic TED Talk. So it's out there, this information, but it hasn't yet infiltrated practice as much as impatient Dr. Zeedyk would like. So if I am talking about this here, and you know what you think, then you are better able to figure out how to bring it to your service and how to tell the woman at the bus stop next to you what our community needs, what this place needs, in order to have babies be born into a world that they know feels happy and inclusive, rather than one that they are worried feels scary. Saber-toothed tigers is a way of talking about the fear that babies are born with if they don't have someone to claim them, someone to attune to, someone who's going to pay attention to their needs. It's just a language for talking about that anxiety and for talking about attachment. But I've tried to find new language precisely because I think not everybody yet gets the things that we're talking about here, and even this science that has been around for quite a while. So, just before we break, I just want to highlight, okay? I'm going to come back to talk about saber-toothed tigers. But if we get the connection that I have been trying to make sweet, also connects to babies' anxiety and fear, that lies at the heart of trauma. This is the lovely little model that the next person speaking after me is going to talk about. But I just wanted to make that link that we're going from connection to fear to trauma, so that we can see how all the pieces that we're talking about today, how they fit together. And in your lovely bags then, this is to help you really want one of these. Keep in mind, my question is, how do we help people to know this? How do we help people to understand and really get this? Okay, do we do that through books that aren't very thick, that would feel, so it feels inviting to read it because it's not very thick and has lovely pictures even of daddies on the front with the title Saber-Toothed Tigers on it, which doesn't sound very professional, but sounds intriguing. You might even, not in this pack, but if you got interested in that, we have also been publishing books on dementia. Remember at the very beginning, I said grown-ups suffer as well. Once we begin to get this, we realize it applies to care homes as well. But I rarely get asked to come and speak to care home audiences because they don't get this kind of training. The people who most likely know this are early years, and yet it applies just as much to care homes. You have in your pack handouts, okay? If you want more of those, take them and give them to the woman at the bus stop. I keep talking about her, but she would like to have been here as well if she knew this was happening, right? Do we need, instead of books, do we need single handouts to hand to people? Do we need e-courses to help professionals learn? Do we need more Facebook and Twitter activity? Now, Dr. Zeedyk actually thinks that very often we should turn off this social media. We should feel lucky that we, A, have someone who loves us, and B, live near a beach. And we should go for walks on the beach. Because there are some people who are really worried that our social media is really interfering in connection. But given that social media is with us, I'm on social media and Twitter a lot now. In fact, I put up an article every single day on Facebook that makes it easy for people to forward about connection. And in fact, it was lovely to hear the numbers of 50,000 a week. This week we reached nearly 200,000 people. I find this astounding, that many people are talking about connection. But at the same time, I want to highlight this image. This is an image that was taken from just an article that was in the paper about a Syrian family that was fleeing. And it was a little tiny story, but for me, the point of it became the mother was talking about how they were fleeing, and her 1-year-old child started screaming that she needed her teddy bear. And somehow a mother, in the middle of fleeing from those bombs, was in tune enough to her child that they went back in to find her teddy bear that her father had given her. And her father had already been disappeared. So this family, as they set off on their journey, not knowing if they were going to be welcomed into new communities, that child's fear was being helped by the fact that she had with her her teddy bear that her mother had had the wherewithal to help her to take out of that house. When we begin to really get it, we see stories of connection everywhere that otherwise we might have taken for granted. And I want to see if we can stop doing that. So, finally, another of the items in your pack is this. I love that North Lanarkshire has made this film available to you. This is a film by an independent filmmaker named Kate Jangra called Babyhood. And it's all about how the modern world is shaping our babies' brains in ways that we haven't expected. I don't know any other conference that has given out copies of this as a resource. And so the fact that North Lanarkshire decided to do this, to make this film more available to people, says to me something about the insights that you have. And once you have taken home this film and had a watch of it, drop a line to Kate Jangra, because she didn't have outside funding to make this film. She did this out of her pocket as a mom of 3 children, because she got enough of it and she wanted to tell other mothers. What resources do we need to help people to get it? So finally, just before we stop for a break, can you please pull out that piece of paper again and answer my 3rd question? We've had a chance to talk about it this morning. You're having a chance to think about it a lot across the whole of North Lanarkshire. What do you now think is the one thing that the public most needs to understand about relationships or the science of relationships? What do people not understand? What do we need to tell them? What gaps are there out there that you kind of know about but you think they might not know? What do we need to do to help spread this? And once you know what you think we most need to know, I then think it's time for a teddy bear break, because we have covered a lot of territory and we need time for our heads to clear. Thank you very much. We'll see you back after the break.